Should show up on my YouTube.
All right. Hello, Internet.
Are we full live? Are we sure we're live? I'm looking at YouTube. We don't quite see it going live. We're almost live, I presume. Still waiting. There's 4 people watching now. It looks like we started the stream, but here we go.
There we
almost
are.
live.
Okay, we're live.
Okay, now we are totally fully live. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another Edge Live Q&A Friday afternoon, 12 Pacific time. We do it every single week. This is now, I can't count how many weeks we've done it, but today you've got myself, Paul Poy. I'm CEO and co-founder, and
I'm William. I do some programming around here.
he hits buttons, but when he hits buttons, magic happens. So yes, William, one of the co-founders and chief architect, he understands all of the stuff going underneath the covers, and actually to some degree above the covers too, of Edge. And so I just got back from a pretty, decent-sized 2-week trip through Europe that was primarily actually announcing what you guys talked about at the Q&A last week.
Which was Biddy.
Biddy. We just integrated a great new back-end exchange partner, Biddy, which for those of you that are in Europe allows you to buy and sell up to $5,000 Swiss franc, about equivalent, right? Swiss franc and a dollar are actually equivalent right now.
At this time, yeah.
At this time right now. So about $5,000 worth of Bitcoin per day with no KYC at all, no email.
Well, let me clarify. The government still knows what's happening because you already have done KYC with your bank. So by simply having a bank account, that's all the information they need.
Exactly. So there's no additional KYC that you're giving up to the
upload
exchange.
your driver's license.
No selfie with a message next to it and your passport and whatnot. You just simply go into Edge, say you want to buy, you obviously pick a country that you're in, which ideally would be somewhere in Europe. Say you're in France, say you want to buy, $4,000 worth of Bitcoin, and then it'll give you information to send a bank transfer, a SEPA or SEPA bank transfer in Europe, and usually within either hours or a day, you get Bitcoin right inside of Edge.
So I want to bring that up because the Reddit people were like, well, if there's no KYC, it's got to be a scam. And it's like, well, actually, no, there's other ways to know this information, right?
Exactly.
Or the other people were like, well, if the government knows my information, I don't want to use it anyway. It's like, no, realistically, we live in a gray zone between the two extremes.
Yeah, exactly. And look at it this way. What other options do you have to use a bank account without KYC? This is really the first of its kind. So really, sure, you can do no KYC at all with cash. That's not anything new. We've had that for years, ever since Bitcoin was invented. But to be able to finally do it through a bank account, especially in this day and age, without any KYC, from the viewpoint of both friction, like the friction of having to provide KYC, as well as from the viewpoint of security of your personal information, this is a great product. And so we're happy to have integrated this partner, and it's live today. Go ahead and check it out.
I almost wish I lived in Europe.
I kind of do too. I almost want to get a European bank account, but unfortunately, being from the US, European banks hate us. And that's a whole other story. We'll have probably someone else on our team who loves talking about, econ and financial systems, complain about why banks outside of the US hate US customers. But anyway, so through this travel that I made in Europe, we got one question frequently, because a lot of people that were new to Edge said, well, how do you guys do this security? It's very unconventional. It's different. And that is very true. We do security differently because our goal is to make security very invisible to the common user.
I would say there's really only one service who's even remotely similar to us, and that was the old blockchain.info wall.
Yeah, and it was actually an inspiration for what we did, but then we took that and actually went leaps and bounds past what their initial concept was in security. And so we're going to cover today how Edge secures cryptocurrency. How do we do things such as automatic encryption and backup, especially two-factor authentication. That's a unique innovation that we have. And then password recovery. That's something that's also really unique. A lot of this stuff actually came out of this guy's head, with some joint conversation on how do we do these things but make it as seamless as possible to the user. So common question, you can kick it off, William. Common question I get is, okay, a user in Edge doesn't actually have to write down anything or back up a file in order to back up their cryptocurrency. They just simply create a username and password and a PIN. So how does that actually secure the funds of a user?
So in a typical setup, if you own your own money, you own your own private keys, and they only belong to you. So if you lose your phone, it goes in the toilet or whatever, you have no backup of your money and you're out of luck. So they have you write down these 12 words typically, and that is your money. It's your key that holds the money on it. And that system we didn't like because where are you going to write it down? Where are you going to put that information?
Right.
And the gold standard for securing information is to encrypt it right? If you encrypt your information, no one's going to be able to read it except the person who knows.
The key to decrypt it.
And also back it up, right? If you don't back it up and you lose your device, it's game over.
Yep.
So we thought, how can we just provide those two gold standard things, encryption and backup, out of the box? You don't have to do any extra work.
Exactly.
So for the encryption, you need some kind of a secret that you know that no one else knows that allows you to decrypt it. So for that, we chose a simple username and password. Both of them are actually the decryption key. It's not just your password. It's both together.
Got it.
Concatenated, that is actually the encryption key. So we generate the private keys for your wallets, the 12-word seeds. We encrypt that data using your username and your password, hashed using something called scrypt.
Right.
Because a username and a password by themselves don't have enough data to really be a strong encryption key. So we run them through something called scrypt, which basically the idea is it hashes them, it takes them and grinds them together to make a bunch of random bits. But it does that thousands and thousands and thousands of times in a way that takes a lot of resources, so that if someone wanted to try guessing passwords and guessing
Right.
usernames, they would have to go through that enormously long process as well every time they
Right.
took a guess, and that will slow them down.
So it's similar to mining in
Yeah.
the sense that mining, you're trying to find the correct number that solves a puzzle. For someone to try to guess a username on Edge, first they would even have to have the data, right? They would have to have the hashed data, and then they would have to actually brute force it and mine for the correct password effectively. Yep.
So the data, what Paul was talking about is the keys to your funds.
Right, the
And
encrypted keys.
Those are sitting on your phone, and they're encrypted using the username and password.
Right.
And so if you lose your phone, that by itself is good enough so that you don't lose access. Like malware that gets on your phone wouldn't necessarily be able to read those out.
Correct.
But if you lose your phone, you still lose your data. So the step 2 is to back it up.
Correct.
And we just do that automatically. Every time you create an account, we instantly back it up. And every time you create a new wallet, we also make a backup of that information.
Got it.
And that just goes to an Edge server. But even though it's on our server, we can't read it because it's encrypted. And we would have to brute force, everything to read anything.
And an analogy that I give people with respect to this brute forcing is that, while Edge holds the encrypted data, one of the important aspects of our security is actually our privacy. You'll notice that when you create an account on Edge, you never provide any personal information. You don't provide an email, a phone number, a name, an address, specifically for the Edge account. You might provide that to one of our exchange partners, but only they see that data. We don't at Edge. So even though we hold these encrypted blobs, we can't associate an encrypted blob with any specific person, a specific email, a specific phone number, and more importantly, a specific public address. These encrypted blobs don't just encrypt the private key, they encrypt everything that a user may do with that account, including the public addresses. So we don't actually know how much value is inside any one of these encrypted accounts. So if an attacker were to gain access to our system, what they would see is millions of these lockers. It's like walking into a gym locker room with millions of lockers. You don't know the code to any one of those lockers, and you don't know what's inside any one of those lockers.
So you could spend resources trying to brute force the twiddle on one of those lockers, and then you get inside, there's nothing.
And there's
'cause
nothing in it.
It's just an account that was never used or whatever.
Exactly. So, what I've said frequently is like there's no perfect level security. There's a whole lot of gray area. But the goal is build a security model that is actually disincentivizing the attacker in the first place. Make it where the motive to actually get into the system is very low because the reward's lower than the energy it would take to get into anything.
If you get into an exchange or some other centralized holder of money, they've got money just sitting on a server somewhere ready to
Ready
do
to pull out.
deposits and withdrawals. So you just take it and you run and you're good.
Yeah.
Whereas if you get into an Edge's system, there's just more layers of encryption that you now have to spend GPUs or whatever trying to
Right.
break, and it's
one by one, as opposed to you getting into the vault and suddenly everybody's money is inside of the vault. Very different from walking into the locker room where you don't know where the money is, how much value is in there, in which one, or what the combination is for any one of the locks. And so that's the kind of the first layer of security that we implement, both securing the user from an attacker via the encryption, as well as securing the user from themselves via backup. And
Right.
everything is automatically backed up as soon as you create an account in Edge. And so that's definitely the first layer. I know that not long after that,
well, we realized typing a password every time you want to
Exactly.
log in is super annoying.
correct.
So we had to come up with something easier to use.
That actually happened really soon after we launched our original app, Airbits.
It was like a month
Like a
afterwards.
month after. It was almost like
We were
emergency.
like on the road traveling to Las Vegas, and you're like, we need to fix this.
We're going to fix this, like entering a password, a good one, every single time you want to launch the app and get into your account was very tedious. And mind you, this was 2014, 2015,
It was
and
like, yeah,
biometric
right around this-
phones
right around
barely
this time,
existed.
yeah.
Actually, barely any phones had biometric, which is definitely a convenience, but at the time, hardly any phones did. And so we needed a more convenient mechanism, so we invented
PIN login.
PIN login. Exactly. So right now you can actually log into your Edge account on a phone that you've already logged into before, meaning a phone that already has your encrypted keys, by just simply using a 4-digit PIN.
So yeah, a fresh phone, you still need the username and password to
Correct.
retrieve the data from the server, populate it on the phone, decrypt it the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the phone, we actually re-encrypt it again using the PIN.
Got
Yeah.
it. So we use a
Well, that's
random
the-
key.
yeah.
That was our original
Yeah.
idea, but we never actually went forward with that. We actually used a random key, a second password.
Yeah.
Mind you, actually a second password is generated just for that phone, and your data is then encrypted with that second password. But then do you want to describe how we incorporate a server component for this PIN login?
Right. So the problem with a PIN is it's only 4 digits, or
Yeah.
maybe we could go to a 6-digit PIN. That might help, right? But
Yeah.
it's something that would be tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands. You could brute force that, try every possible PIN in seconds on any kind of
Exactly.
computing device.
Yep.
So a PIN by itself is not enough to be an encryption key for data. So if we simply had the PIN on the phone, then anybody could just try.
Mind you, too, that there are several well-known cryptocurrency wallets that actually encrypt your data with the PIN. They don't use the hardware on the phone. They're not using the secure element on the phone. They're literally just taking a PIN, which is why they're asking for a really long PIN, like 8 to 10 digits, and then encrypting the data on your phone with that PIN. Mind you, that's one of the kind of most non-best practice mechanisms for encrypting data. You shouldn't be using an actual PIN because that's very limited in entropy. Its randomness is very poor. So
Have you seen these robots where it's like a little touch like pen, and then it's like on a Lego thing?
Oh, yeah,
it's
and it
like,
just kinda
they got
guesses
the
your
phone
pin.
here. It's like
Guessing pin.
Nope. It's like
Right,
a
right.
little mechanical thing.
Now, granted, if you're doing it to a phone, most phones at least have some rate limiting.
Yeah, they'll lock
Right.
you out.
They'll lock you out. But when it comes to encryption, you can't really rate limit encryption other than by strong password hashing.
Right.
And
Because as soon as you get the data off of the hard drive, it's just you
Yeah,
run
you
it through
a bunch of times.
Yeah, it's
Exactly.
instantly easy.
Exactly. So going back to the way we do implement PIN login, go ahead.
So the
and
solution
describe.
is basically the server, a completely separate server from, well, it's the same physical server, but it's a separate section of the server from the login system. Every time you enter the PIN, we hash that. We actually HMAC it with a random key that's on the phone. So the server doesn't know what the PIN is because it's
Correct.
completely obscured by this random data that's stored on the phone. So we take that PIN, the 4 digits, take this other huge amount of random data that's on the phone, smush them together, send them up to the server, and the server simply checks, does this match what it's supposed to be for this particular
Right.
device?
So the server has a hash, an HMAC hash of the PIN.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't know the actual PIN. It knows the PIN as if it was hashed with a key that the user has on their phone. Once
Right.
again, this is specific to the user's device.
And that's
Only
why
the
it
user's
has,
device has
that's
that.
why it only works if you've logged in once before, because we
Right.
have to set it up.
You're going to set it up, and by authenticating with the server using a hash of the PIN, the server can then send back a key which allows the user to
Decrypt the data that's on their device.
decrypt the data that's specifically on their device. I believe two keys come together in order to be able to do that. And so this is a convenient mechanism that uses a server that can rate limit. This is the key thing. Servers can rate limit access to guesses of pins and passwords and
Right.
whatnot.
So if you make a wrong PIN, and then another attempt, wrong PIN, another attempt, wrong PIN, then the server will say, okay, now I'm going to double the amount of time you have to wait. So it goes from, you have to wait a second before you try again. You try again, another wrong PIN. Now it's 2
Couple
seconds you
seconds.
have to wait.
Right.
Do it again, you have to wait 4 seconds, and then
Exactly.
8 seconds.
If you know anything about exponents, they go up really fast. And before you know it, you're waiting days. And people have experienced this in iPhone and iPad and Android phones where you've entered the PIN a few times wrong. You're going to have to wait and wait and wait. And this is something that a server can implement that encryption by itself can't. And so this is how you're able to have significantly higher level of strength with just a PIN.
So even if you do
itself.
manage to, if a hacker manages to extract the data off the phone,
Mm-hmm.
it's useless without the other piece of data that's on the server, and they're not
Right.
going to get that from our server without
Obviously
randomly
breaking in.
guessing, and it's just not going to happen.
Exactly. So
At the,
PIN
sa-
login.
at the same time, our server that can't do jack because even the data that it has needs the data on the phone
Exactly.
to decrypt. It's just a key that decrypts this stuff, and we don't have it.
In a way, this is inspired by the concepts of multisig.
Yeah.
Right, taking keys and splitting them up between different parties so that you're not trusting one party or another. And that's what we implemented to give people the convenience of PIN login. Now, admittedly, probably in this day and age, not as many people use the PIN login if they choose to use biometric. And so, covering biometric as an
I
alternative.
actually trust the PIN login more than I trust the biometrics
and that's
on my
entirely
phone.
fair.
You know?
And that's entirely fair. So we give people that choice. If you have biometric on your phone, it's enabled, then it can be used.
Well, there's actually a legal reason too.
What's that?
There's a legal reason.
There's actually a very significant legal reason as far as what you can be required to do with your own personal device.
Yeah, so in court, in a court of law in the United States, now this may not be true in other parts of the world, but in the United States, they can compel you to provide your fingerprint because the fingerprint's just something that's part of your body. They can they can put handcuffs on you. They can look at your finger. That's
Right,
they're
exactly.
allowed to do that. But because of the right to search and seizure, they're not, or right to personal. I'm not sure which of the amendments it is, but they can't compel you to reveal information that would
Right.
incriminate you. I think it's the Fifth Amendment to the
Right.
United States Constitution. So that means they can't compel you to tell you what your PIN is or your password is. So if
Exactly.
you use the PIN or the password, then law enforcement can't compel you to reveal that and therefore gain access to your account. Whereas if you use your fingerprint, they could.
And in general, even if it's not law enforcement and it's just a bad actor that you're running into in the streets, it's generally harder for them to get something out of your head than it is to have a part of your body. And so if it's a fingerprint, they literally knock you out and then put your thumb on your phone.
Right.
Right. If they knock you out, you're not going to be saying your PIN. Right. So there is definitely advantages from a physical security level to a PIN, which is why we still retain it even in this world of biometric. And so people have that choice.
So that's why I personally use PIN login on
There you
my
go.
phone.
And so if you do use PIN login and you want to use it, you want to be a bit hardened against that physical threat as well as that kind of law enforcement threat. Now you understand how it works inside of Edge. It's a split key mechanism, one key on the device, one key on Edge, and the PIN authenticates with our server to get that second key. Cool.
So fingerprint login, how does that work though? That's actually probably the easiest login method we have implemented because it's simply, we take the encryption key for that bundle of data and we stick it in the phone's biometric
Right,
area.
secure element in the biometric area. Yep.
So you hit your fingerprint, the phone unlocks that information, it goes into Edge, and it decrypts the data, and there it is. So we're kind of really relying on the phone's.
It's the phone security at that point
Yeah.
in order to make sure that key doesn't get exposed.
And again, that's why you have to log in the first time because there's no data for the phone to decrypt until you've done that first login. So you still
Yeah.
have to do one login, download the data, and now that key that's stored in your fingerprint reader can actually do its job.
And I think you'll notice that this is common across any app that uses biometric login, is that you can't just download the app and suddenly biometrically log in. It needs some initial authentication to get some data to know that was you in the first place, and that the biometric is now a convenience to re-log in, just like our PIN is a convenience to re-log in. It doesn't stand alone. So in Edge, in order to log in on a new device, you would need to use your full password. But we do have actually another option. But we'll talk about that later, our password recovery. But I think the next thing after we did PIN login that we found was very important was
Two-factor.
good old two-factor. You've heard about this for years, that you should enable two-factor on all of your accounts, blah, 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 blah. And we do have that in Edge, but it's fairly unique.
No, the problem is passwords and usernames are guessable. Period.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
they're guessable. I mean, if you can remember it in your head, it's probably not that strong, and therefore someone else can guess it.
Especially someone that might know you.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, I have used passwords in multiple places, and I'm not proud to admit that. But if I use the same, test 1 2 on this thing, and then test 1 2 exclamation point on that thing, then it's
There's some similarities there.
someone might be able to guess that.
Right, exactly. And so sometimes a service, and some of the largest services in the world get compromised, and many of them are compromised and don't even hold the passwords for their users in an encrypted form.
Yeah.
That's been discovered. And so if an attacker got access to, LinkedIn maybe, and got access to unencrypted passwords there, they could then take those passwords and try to use them into other services. And that's kind of the inherent challenge of passwords, is that they tend to be non-unique. across the different providers that someone might use.
So using password managers is a good solution for
Yep.
like managing logins to hundreds of websites, but even so, if you don't get it perfect, it's still that kind of that risk. So how do you get more security besides that? And so what we've implemented for Edge is two-factor.
Yep.
So basically, the very first time you've downloaded your data, you need to go to the server to retrieve your backup. Because if you've brand new phone, never been logged into Edge before, it doesn't have the encrypted data, your password and username are not enough because we don't have the thing they would unlock in the first place. So you have to
Right.
go hit our server. So our server says, if you've enabled two-factor, not only must you provide your username and your password correctly, and bear in mind they're hashed, so we don't even know
Correct.
what those are, but if you not only must you provide those two pieces of information, but you must also provide the correct two-factor token
Correct. And that two-factor token
to
is what you
retrieve
would-
your backup.
is what for a lot of people are familiar with in applications like Google Authenticator or Authy, which you go to log into the app you actually want to access. It says enter the two-factor code, which then requires you to go into another application and see these 6 digits that kind of change every 30 seconds and copy then paste them and rewind. You still have to have set that up in the first place ahead of time. Ahead of time, you would have had to pair your two-factor app with the actual app or website you wanted to log into. And so that process is what many people are actually familiar with.
Yeah.
And so that rotating number,
That's 6
is,
digits.
the 6-digit number is a hash of the two-factor token. And that two-factor token only sits on your device and on the server. It's not something that you memorize. It's not something that you may have had on any other server before. And so it inherently is what they frequently call it an OTP, a one-time password.
Right.
Right. And it's unique to that service and to your device.
So if you're logging into a new phone for the first time on Edge, we've typed your username, you've typed your password, you go to the server and say, hey, can I get my backups? And the server says, no, I'm not going to give you your backups because you have two-factor turned on and I need this extra 6-digit code.
Yep.
So on the phone, we pop up a pop-up saying, hey, we need this code. Can you go get it for me? So
Right.
2 ways you can do that. One is if you have a second device, say you're logging in on your tablet like this iPad here in front of you,
Right.
but you have your phone already, that's where you created the account. Well, easy. You take your phone, you log in there. The phone has the token, and then you scan the barcode on the tablet that pops up, and then the phone will transfer that token to the tablet, and now the tablet can
And then
log
you're
in
good.
as well. And you have the backups retrieved and everything's good.
Exactly. So one of the most common questions I get with respect to our 2FA is from people that have used 2FA before and don't understand why it's so easy. Right? Because normally they say, okay, I go set up 2FA, and like, okay, well, I got to get my two-factor application, then I got to get my app that I'm trying to log into, take the token, copy and paste it into the two-factor application, and then it generates the 6 digits, and then copy and paste the 6-digit back into the you've probably done this before. It's a big heinous mess. When they go to Edge, I tell them enable two-factor. It's very important. It protects your account. They go to settings, they tap enable two-factor, and then it's done. And they're like, okay, well, I still have to copy my token, right? I got to launch my Google Authenticator, right? I got to put in my phone number, right? So they'll send me a text message, right? I'm like, no, you're actually just done. and that's actually the weirdest thing is we've simplified something to the point where the people are accustomed to the pain. It's like your people want the pain. We've tried to alleviate the pain for you guys, but admittedly, yes. So for those new to two-factor, it's great.
So the best way to back up your token, if you want to make a backup of your token, is simply to log into Edge on another phone, maybe your wife's phone, or
Yeah,
a
some
tablet
trusted
that you
person.
own, some other kind of device. Now you've got 2 devices logged in. If one of them loses the token, the other one is the backup.
Yep, that's exactly
And
it.
you're
And
done.
so you don't need another app. You don't need another app. And a lot of those apps don't even let you back up the token.
Yeah.
Right? They're just sitting there and you change phones, so you have to go to redo your two-factor. But then the most important question I get after this, of course, is, well, what happens if I only have one phone?
And you do lose the
And
phone.
you do lose the phone and you didn't back up the token. So what is a user to do then?
Then you go into you type in your username, you type in your password, you log in, and it gives you that barcode and says, hey, you need this token. And you say,
Right.
I don't have it. I literally don't have it. It doesn't exist anywhere that I know of. What can I do? You hit the reset button.
Cool.
Now, what's going to happen is we're going to send, for 1 week, we're going to send to any device that has ever had that account on it a notification saying that a two-factor reset is happening.
Right, someone requested a reset. It's like a little warning notification.
So if nobody responds and cancels that, then that means that this is probably the only device that has this on it. And therefore, in a week, it will simply reset the two-factor and you can log in again, same username, same password, get in. It's turned off on the server. We can retrieve the backups and everything is as it was.
Exactly.
But if you have, say, someone compromises your username and your password, they were able to guess it off of the internet, and you on your phone see that little pop-up that says someone's trying to reset two-factor, that means they guessed your password.
Exactly.
And
that
if
gives you that opportunity to effectively, it gives you that warning and the opportunity to go into the app and change your password.
Because someone knows it.
Because someone already knows it.
So that's not only is it helping to prevent that other person from logging in, because now you're being warned that this is happening, but
Right.
it also kind of tells you that this is happening, so you know that that is compromised, and you can actually protect yourself.
Exactly. So I think to really encompass what we're doing here with two-factor on multiple levels is, number one, we implemented a two-factor that does not require another app. Right? We took Google Authenticator, the protocol of Google Authenticator, and the app of Edge, and smashed the two together, where Edge itself does the copying and pasting of those 6 digits for you. It's the same protocol underneath the covers. You get the same level of security as if you had these two apps. But then second is then now the question of how do you recover? We could have at Edge implemented recovery via another side channel such as your phone number or email. But once again, as I'd mentioned, we don't want to compromise the security.
We don't want to know who you are.
We don't want to know who you are. We don't want a phone number, because that both compromises personal information, but also security of those encrypted blobs. We don't want a phone number or email associated with those encrypted blobs. So really, this is actually what had us rack our brain to say, how do we implement two-factor that's anonymous yet still recoverable? And we're using here what is a very common tool in security, which is just simply time. Right? That 7-day timeout is a feature of security that we're utilizing, allowing you to still recover that account, if you lose the two-factor token, but at the same time make it very difficult for an attacker to gain access, because you will know if they've compromised your password. So highly recommend everyone do enable two-factor. It just requires a tap of a button in settings and Edge, and know that you're protected from anyone that might have access to your password. We got a question here that we probably should answer. So what happens if the servers go down? So what happens to the app? This is a great question from
this is the most beautiful
Rethinking
part.
the Dollar. And actually, this is one of the biggest differences between Edge and what you had mentioned with blockchain.info.
Yeah. This is actually the most beautiful part of our architecture.
Yes, and one of the things that causes us like a lot of engineering headache, because it's actually hard to do.
It's very hard to do, but we actually did something pretty awesome here.
Cool,
if our servers go down, nothing happens. You can still log in with your fingerprint or your password.
Yep.
Because all you're doing is decrypting information that's already on your phone.
Yep.
And that information is private keys. And those private keys allow your phone to talk directly to the blockchain.
Yep.
So you log in, your money's still there, you can send, you can receive, you can do everything. The app is fully functional, even if our servers are 100% down, because all they are doing is backing up information. As long as the information is on your phone, you're good.
Yep, the accounts in Edge make people feel like they're accessing a centralized service like a Coinbase. But what we've done is given that user experience, but retained a lot of the benefits of a non-custodial, client-side, standalone application that you run on your device without any third party. And so we still have servers that hold backups. So, caveat, the app works what I call like 99% of its functionality.
Yeah.
You send and receive funds, work just fine. Decrypt your keys and send and receive funds. You actually don't need Edge servers to be able to do that.
But if you wanted to say change your password, change your PIN, all those kinds of things, you kind of need to talk to the server to reset up the encryption. But what's happening on your phone with the money is still entirely your money.
Yeah, so the limitations, the kind of list of limitations if Edge servers were to go down would be you wouldn't be able to log in on a new device. You wouldn't be able to create a new wallet within your account, because we want to back up the keys for that wallet. You wouldn't be able to change two-factor settings, change your password. You wouldn't be able to log in with a PIN, because a PIN does require the server. And then, as we'll talk about a little bit later, you wouldn't be able to utilize password recovery. Right? But for the most part, for a user that just wants to go and send some money, receive some money, they don't really need Edge functioning. They've already got it on their phone, just biometric or password login, and you're in, and send and receive. And so there's times where we, just like any other service, we'll have some server maintenance. We'll be down for an hour or two. None of our users complain. Only the ones that complain are the ones that just downloaded Edge and want to create an account. Those are the ones that go, hey, I just downloaded your app, why can't I create my account? That would be the only folks that would be affected. For the most part, everyone else just fires up the app and sends and receives as normal. So hopefully that answers your question. Rethinking the dollar is the name, and feel free to fire off any other questions. That's a really good one. So thanks a whole bunch for that one. Okay, we covered encryption of keys. One common question, I want to rewind a little bit back to the first thing we said, because some people that don't understand how we encrypt keys will say, well, if you're having a password talk to the server and it's encrypting the keys, how is it that the server doesn't have access to the money?
Right.
All right, you want to describe that, our little split, two hashing system there a little
bit?
bit?
So the scrypt function that I said, we take the password, we run it through this bit grinder that randomizes it kind of, and it takes a huge amount of computer power. Well, not huge, I mean, it runs on a smartphone, but it's significant, right? It takes a half a second on a smartphone to do this calculation. That function's parameterizable, so you can change it and tweak it, and the data that comes out the other side is completely different.
Right.
So what we do is we take your username and your password and we actually run them through this twice.
Got it.
Once is the one that's used for encryption on the phone.
Yep.
And the other one is used for authentication to the server.
Correct. Two different hashes with the same source.
The same source of information, but it goes through two completely different algorithms.
If you know anything about hashing algorithms, once you go in two different directions from the same source, you can't derive the results of one from the results of the other.
You have to be able to reverse the whole hash, which is like which it's not next to impossible, but it's very expensive.
It's significantly hard. So this is how we're able to effectively use the same user experience as logging into a server to do two things. Effectively actually log into the server, and then download and then decrypt the funds for you at that point, at the point in time when you have that.
So the username and password never leave the phone until they've been hashed. A lot of services will do the hashing on the server.
Correct.
But we don't do it on the server. We do it on the phone. Before it even leaves the phone, it's already fully secured.
Yep. And then actually on the server, we rehash it again for additional level of security for the comparison to authenticate the user in the future.
And the other thing is too, we don't even send the username. We send the hash of the username.
Exactly.
So the server doesn't even know what you typed in. So we can't even associate to like a human email or anything.
Exactly. So this is how far we go to really retain not just the privacy but the security of user information and of course funds. All stuff hashed client side, we almost assume that the network connection between the user and the server is compromised, because even if it were, it would still be just encrypted and hashed data going across the wire. Cool. So now, last thing, biggest one,
password recovery.
This is always a big question. Well, what if I lose my password? And people do lose passwords. And admittedly, there is no 100% solution. But at Edge, we're trying to build the most forgiving solution that still implements a very high level of security for users.
So I would say, first of all, if you lose your password, don't worry. If you have if you have PIN, or fingerprint, you're good to go. Because what you do, you should just log into the app 20 times on average.
If you still have the app on the device.
If you still have the app on your phone, the data's still there, you just log into it a bunch of times, and will pop up this notification. You've probably seen it. It's the do you remember your password?
Do you remember your password? So this is the first step in not losing your password, is just simply don't forget it. And that's one thing we implement in Edge, is just a subtle little reminder, hey, do you remember it?
And if that reminder comes up and you don't remember your password, just type in some random garbage, say check, and it'll be like, hey, that's wrong. Do you want to reset your password?
Yep.
And you say, yes, I do want to reset my password. Pick a new password, type it in, and you're done. Now that new password is the password on your account, and now you know your password again.
Exactly. So there's a chance for you to reset it, as long as you still have the current device that you've logged into before.
Yeah.
And you're able to log in with either PIN or biometric.
That's the easiest way to recover your password. Now,
Yep.
If that didn't happen, but you did set up password recovery, then we have another way to get it.
Got it. So let's talk about password recovery. What's the user experience of setting it up? And then we'll talk a little bit about how does it work underneath the covers.
Right. So the way you set up password recovery is you basically send yourself an email. And that email goes into your inbox. You keep a hold of it. Don't throw that email away. Don't lose it. Because in that email is a special link.
Right.
You tap that link, you go into the app, you answer 2 questions that you set up when you set up the password recovery.
So that's actually the first part of the password recovery. You
pick 2 questions.
Pick a couple personal questions and answer them, their personal answers.
Email yourself the link.
And then there's a link which you'll email yourself. That email doesn't come from us. It doesn't come from Edge. It's literally from the user to himself. So ironically, if you ever set up password recovery, you might not see the email in your inbox. You'll see it in your outbox.
In your sent folder.
In your sent folder, because you sent it to yourself.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. And so that's the experience of setting it up. Now, to do the recovery, you were saying,
you tap the link.
Go to the link.
You enter the two answers that you set it up with, and if the answers match, you're in.
You're in.
And you can reset your password and you're good to go.
Yep, simple as that.
So how does that work?
Yeah, what's the magic underneath the cover? Because people are like, whoa, this is just kind of like my bank account. And then they use that in some banks to recover access to your account.
Well, I would say one critical difference is when you set up recovery on a bank account, you pick the two questions, but then you send yourself the email when a problem happens. For us, we actually have to send the email preemptively.
Ahead of time.
And that's a big difference. And
Yep.
if you don't have that email, you can't get the email. So you need
Right,
to
right.
have that special link. That link is kind of part of the magic. And it needs
Okay.
to be set up ahead of time.
Okay.
So what's in the link? So on it's kind of the same way PIN works. We actually encrypt your data twice, once or three times, I guess. Once
times,
with
yeah.
your password, once with your PIN, and then once with your
Or
recovery.
your PIN key,
Yeah.
the random key for your PIN. And then
random-
once with the recovery.
The recovery key.
Recovery key. This is another fully random 256-bit number.
Yeah.
This isn't the answers to your recovery questions. It's just another. It's like just another password that we create.
It's another very, very strong key. It's as strong as a cryptographic key for like
Correct.
Bitcoin. It's
Yep.
that level of key.
Okay.
And so what we do is we actually are backing up half of the key, and the other half of the key is stored on the phone.
Got it. So half of the key is being backed up in
The email,
the email
and the other half's on the phone, and also backed up on the server as well.
and on the server. Exactly.
Yeah. So if you have the account on your phone, it's very simple. You answer the questions. That goes to this. No, actually, that's right. It's down on the phone. That's the difference. I forgot. This is actually a little bit tricky. The half is in the email and half is on the server.
Correct. Edge holds one half of the key. Your email holds the other half.
Right. So we go on the phone and we say, okay, so I've received the answers to the questions. I will send the answers to the server.
Correct.
And if the server checks them and they match, again, they're hashed, so we don't
They're
actually
hashed.
know what they are. We will pull them back down, the other half of the key that's stored on the server.
Got it.
So
You now have the key from the email in combination with the key from the server,
bring those two together
and now you have basically yet another password which allows you to log in.
decrypt the data.
And decrypt the data, but not only decrypt the data, but also be able to download the data off
Right.
the server. So password recovery, unlike the PIN, works on other devices.
Right. So if you've
you
never
lose
logged
your-
in, on a new phone, you can still use the recovery because half of it's in the email, half of it's in the server.
Exactly. And so this is, once again, just like multisig, much inspired by it. It's the concept of split key recovery, right? Take whatever it is that you need to be able to get access to this account, but split it in half. And the important thing about this recovery is that it also retains the kind of non-custodial nature. Means that Edge, while it only has half of this key, has no ability to decrypt your data all by itself. Like the user has the other half of the key, but also the questions and answers Edge also doesn't actually have.
Yeah, we have those questions and answers hashed with the key from the email.
Exactly. So the key that the user has in their email will actually encrypt the questions. So we don't even see the questions, and it will hash the answers. And so anything that the server ever sees is completely non-visible to Edge or any of its infrastructure. So we've implemented what is very close. It's a subtle difference. Just like William mentioned, it's important to note that that email for recovery has to happen ahead of time in the setup process, not happen later when you lose your password. But other than that, shift in order, it's a very familiar process to people for being able to recover an account while still keeping the non-custodial nature.
And so what's the risk of this system? I mean, granted, everything you do to help yourself get back in is also going to help an attacker get in.
Correct.
So the risk is if an attacker gets into your email inbox and gets that
Key.
that link that has that key in it, and they are able to guess your answers, then they can log into your account.
Yep, that would be true.
But
However,
if you set up two-factor,
exactly,
there you go.
then you're also protected. So they would have to do 3 things to get access to your account via password recovery. They would have to get access to your email, 1. They'd have to get access or know the answers to your questions, 2. And they would have to have the two-factor token, which is only on your device, 3. They'd have to have all of those. If they didn't have the two-factor token, then they'd have to wait 7 days during which you'd be notified on your phone that someone has access to your device. So all of that now has to be in play for them to be able to get access to your account. So like I said, while there's nothing perfect, that's a huge barrier for an attacker to gain access to funds. And that's where layering multiple levels of security, all of which are relatively convenient, but layering them makes for both a very convenient and forgiving mechanism for the user, while at the same time a very difficult and very resistant security model against an attacker. Yep. I think we covered the whole gist of it.
That's basically it, yeah.
Yep. So that, hopefully in a not so small nutshell, is the Edge security model. It's something that we've carried over from the early days when we were Airbitz. Now today is Edge. And if you like what you're hearing, definitely give Edge a try. And also, if you're developing apps, so that entire security model is available for your app as a platform. We are an SDK, a security SDK that several different dApps use for their own app. And so if you've got any other questions, we're definitely, thanks Rethinking the Dollar for appreciating the answer to your question. Thanks for chiming in and asking. Going forward, let us know if you have any other questions about the security model. Hopefully we covered it in pretty thorough detail, but you can catch us on Twitter, at Edge Wallet. Like to kind of recap real quickly, if you want to actually ask us questions in person, where we're going to be, most immediately we're going to be at Vegas at the World CryptoCon end of this month. It's going to cross over right into Halloween. Yeah, I think the last day is Halloween. We'll be there the 29th and 30th, and maybe a tiny bit on the 31st. But as well, we'll have most of the team, actually a good handful of the team, about 4 of us there at Vegas. But right after this live broadcast, so we end this we were supposed to end at 12:30, went a little bit long today, a lot to cover. But at 3 p.m. Pacific, so it's at 6 p.m. Eastern, I'll be on an episode of Coin Watch with Naomi Brockwell. And we'll be covering we always cover 2 coins in about an hour. Today we're going to be covering Ether and BSV and going in deep dive into the technology, the founding of the coins, and a little bit about how they're marketed and whatnot. So tune in if you're interested in any of those coins and are hopefully as objective as possible, take on those currencies. I try as hard as I can to be objective, and I'll honestly say the pros and cons of every one. And so tune in then. Otherwise,
good.
Closing it out, huh?
Good podcast.
Another good podcast. A lot of great information. Thank you to the folks over in Europe during my travels for asking us this question over and over again, because it motivated us to do this episode. So thanks again. Until next Friday for the next live Q&A.
Your keys, your coins.
Not your keys, not your coins. Take care, everybody.